Hello everyone, welcome to the SI2 webinar for steering teams. This month we're working on goals. My name is Sue Reynolds and I'm president of the American Student Achievement Institute. So here's today's topics. As always, we're going to start out with a very quick review of the organizational structure and our improvement process, and then today we'll be talking about goals. So we'll do a very quick introduction of goals and the terminology that we use and how schools in SI2 set their goals and document their goals. And then we'll talk about having your discussions locally. We'll start out with an individual review of your student achievement data report, and then we'll look at having some group discussions. The first discussion will be about what pleases you, what disturbs you in your own student achievement data, and then also what gaps you see between different student groups. And then the last discussion will be, after you've had that general discussion, then we'll say, okay, now let's define what are our PAIs and our SMART goals. And today we'll define what PAIs and SMART goals are and teach you how to write them and how to document them in our system. Okay. So let's start out with that review. Just a quick review. Don't forget, here's our organizational structure. You're part of a steering team, and each person on the steering team has a certain set of tasks to complete, and that you are collecting data, you're holding discussions, and you're creating products. So you are the worker bees for school improvement. You're managing the school improvement process in your building. Okay, then also just a reminder that normally SI2 works with a student body, has student body discussions, and also works with an improvement council, but because of time constraints this year, we're not working with those two groups. Okay, so let's look at the process. So we looked at putting together your steering team. You've done that, you've delegated tasks, you've collected data, so that get ready step we've already completed. We've also completed the introduction. We did that a couple of webinars ago. And then this last work period, you created your vision statement. We asked you to bring a copy of that vision statement with you to this discussion. And specifically in your vision statement, we'll be looking at your dream data or your vision data, which is the very last section in that vision statement. That's going to be the pie in the sky kind of direction that we work toward in this goals segment. So today let me back up. We have several products now. The product that we added to our list is your vision statement. So as we're building this group of products that will become your school improvement plan, we now have the vision statement to add into that. Okay, so today we're working on goals. And we're going to come up with two types of goals, two different levels of goals. One is your PAIs, or your priority areas for improvement, and then the other is your SMART goals. So those are the areas that we're working on today. Then, just looking ahead a little bit, the next step is to look at your root causes. So once we know what the goals are, then we'll start to say, okay, how come students aren't achieving in that area? What's getting in the way? Those are your root causes, and then the webinar after that will focus on writing interventions. What are we going to do about the things that are getting in the way of your goals? And then finally, in the last part, the last webinar, we'll look at preparing those interventions, getting them ready to implement with integrity. So, okay, so that's the process real quickly, and again, today we're working on step 3, which is your goal setting. And let's start out with that introduction. So, one of the things we wanted to point out is that we've worked very carefully to align our terminology with the Department of Education's terminology. We totally revamped our system a couple of years ago to make that terminology alignment. We have always had broad goals and targeted data targets. in SI2. So this was nothing new for us. We just had to change what we called them. But for 20 years we've been using broad goals and targeted goals. So we made the terminology change so that when schools are talking with the Department of Ed and you're talking SMART goal, the Department of Ed will know what you're talking about. Or if they're saying to you SMART goal, you'll know what the Department of Ed is talking about. So on this slide, what I'd like you to see is that there's two different levels of goals. We have priority areas for improvement, which are very broad goals, and then under each of the priority areas there are very targeted and specific SMART goals. So we'll give you some examples of those, but I wanted you to see kind of the organizational structure of it, that there's these broad focus areas and then there's very specific goals underneath them. Okay, so let's look at those broad areas first. And again, a PAI, or a priority area for improvement, is a broad area of focus. So when you're defining your PAIs, you're going to ask yourself these questions. What's the focus of this broad area? And we're looking at pass rate on ISTEP or ECA. Are we looking at the percentage of students who are experiencing student growth, adequate student growth? Are we looking at focusing on our graduation rate or career ready, which is another word for APIB and dual credit? So what's the focus of our broad area where we want to improve? And then what's the subject? Is the subject math, English, in ISTEP, or is it English 10 or Algebra 1? And then you'll notice too that it says other subjects. We also, in SI2, we think that schools should have PAIs in all areas besides math and English, in many areas besides math and English. So you have the option of putting in subjects like social studies or biology or other subjects besides math or English. Then we'll ask you, is this a broad area of focus for what grade levels? And what subgroups or focus areas? So is this a broad area of improvement goal for the bottom 25% of the kids, or is this a target you have for the top 75%? Or in high school, are you looking for improvement between 8th grade and 10th grade, or 10th grade and 12th grade? So when you define your broad areas, these are the kind of questions that we will ask you, and you'll come up with a PAI. The other thing I want you to focus on this slide is that this slide is directly aligned with the Student Achievement Plan format from the Department of Ed. So we ask you these 4 questions because on the form that you will turn into Department of Ed later, that form asks you these 4 questions. Our system is going to spit that form out for you completed, and so this is where you're putting in the answers to those questions that will go into the Student Achievement Plan and your School Improvement Plan down the road. This is directly aligned with DOE's format. So DOE calls things focus, subject, grade levels, and subgroups, so that's what we're calling them. So PAIs are these very, very broad areas. The other thing that I want to say about PAIs, and I'm saying this kind of carefully, is that PAIs are good to have, but they really don't drive student achievement because they're so broad. If we say that we want to improve in math, that doesn't really tell us what to work on. Is it algebraic equations? Is it what's the area that's of issue? So we want these broad goals to give us a general sense of what we're working on. So we know we're working on math. We're working on increasing pass rate in math on ISTEP. But now we have to get to this very specific level, and that will come in the SMART goals. So again, PAIs, very broad, kind of give us a general sense of where we're going. In terms of some of the definitions that DOE has for these areas in the PAIs, proficiency is the percentage of students who pass ISTEP or ECA. Student growth is the percentage of all students who make expected gains on ISTEP or ECA. Graduation rate is the percentage of graduation cohort that graduate in 4 years. And then career ready is the percentage of students who pass an AP test, IB exam, earn 3 college credits, or pass an industry certification exam. So when, I'm going to go back a slide, in this area when you're asked to, to say this is a PAI for student proficiency or student growth or graduation, what I'm working on, this is the definition of those terms so that you know kind of what you're talking about there. Okay, so here's some examples. This is an elementary example. So if this were my PAI, when I was defining the PAI, my first thing was, okay, what's this broad area going to focus on? And I thought, okay, let's focus on the pass rate on I-STEP, so it's student proficiency. And then, well, which subject? Well, I looked at my language arts, my math, and we want to focus on math. So this PAI is for math. You may have another PAI for language arts, but this PAI is on math. And then what grade level? So I've looked at my grade level, and I know that 6th grade is kind of an issue. And am I going to focus then on my high achieving students, or my, not high achieving, but the top 75%, or am I focused on the bottom 25%? So I'm going to select, I want to help the kids who are the lowest achieving on this PAI. I'm going to select the bottom 25%. Again, you could have another PAI that focused on the exact same things, but this one was on the top 75%. So yeah, so that's how you would kind of, design this. And if I were one of your parents or somebody on your school board, I could look at this PAI and say, oh, okay, we're working on math, specifically with 6th graders. It's, I'm working with the lowest achieving kids, and I'm working to increase the pass rate. So it gives me kind of a broad sense of what the school's working on. What it does not tell me is specifically what is it in that math that the kids aren't mastering. Which 6th graders are not mastering that content? Is it all 6th graders, or is it just my free and reduced lunch kids, or is it just my boys? So it's broad, it's not specific. Okay, here's a PAI that's a high school example. This might be, again, let's say proficiency rate. And then I'm saying, okay, where's my issues? Well, more specifically, it's Algebra 1 ECA. This time, instead of saying that I'm working with 9th graders or 11th graders, I'm going to say the class of maybe 2018. That way I can follow that class to see, okay, what's the pass rate on Algebra 1 when that class is in, when they were in 8th grade coming into my school, what's the pass rate in 10th grade, what's the pass rate when they're in 11th grade, 12th grade, so I can, with that same group of students in the class of 2018 or 2020, I can follow that group of kids and watch that percentage pass rate increase over the years with that same group of kids. So again, that's another way of identifying the student group. And then the subgroup is, this time I'm going to work with that, and I'm trying to improve the pass rate between 8th grade and 10th grade, or 10th grade, 12th grade. So again, that's kind of how we're defining that PAI. So, and again, if I'm on your school board, or I'm a parent, or I'm at the Department of Ed, I get a general sense of what the school's working on. But again, in terms of just developing a school improvement plan, that does not tell me what the issue is in Algebra 1, what standards are the kids not mastering, nor does it tell me specifically within this class of 2019 or whatever which kids it is. Is it my free and reduced lunch kids, or just exactly who is not being proficient? So okay. Okay, so now to be specific, which is really important in your school improvement planning, the better you do this step, the better of a school improvement plan you're going to have, and the more likely you are going to be to raise achievement. SMART goals are really important. So that's where we get very concrete and very targeted. So again, in the format, we're going to have this broad goal, maybe, the percent of the bottom 25% that are passing I-STEP math, but now we want to put these very specific goals underneath that broad area. Okay, so that's kind of the organizational structure that shows the relationship between PAIs and SMART goals. Okay, so when we ask you to develop a SMART goal, our online system will prompt you to identify these things for each of your SMART goals. The first one is a student group. A student group could be all students in your building. All students in your building will, get to a certain benchmark. So, so it could be all students. But it also could be a very specific student group. Like if you looked at your data and you find that your paid lunch students are all, meeting the benchmark, but your free and reduced lunch students are not, you might have a very specific student group in your SMART goal. It's the free and reduced lunch kids that we're after. Or maybe it's a grade level, the third graders, or maybe it's boys or Hispanic students. So in your SMART goals, you might have it be for all students, but when schools really get focused, they're looking at, okay, which kids is it that are not achieving? And they'll target those kids, and then that will allow them to design really focused interventions. If boys aren't achieving in reading, and you have one of your SMART goals around reading for boys, then when you get to the intervention level, you can say, okay, now what can we do to engage boys? Because boys are the issues, and you'll focus your interventions so that it engages boys at a higher level. So it's really important to really hone in on this student group. Okay, next thing we'll ask is, okay, we'll say, you've got that student group defined. What is it that you want them to do? And you'll come up with the benchmark. So you'll say, we want those boys to master ratios or to pass a local quarterly on-track test that all of our students get, all our teachers give, to see if kids are progressing. Or we want those boys to earn 10 Core 40 credits by the end of 9th grade. We're focusing on what we want that group to do. Then we'll ask you to put in baseline data. We'll say, okay, put in some baseline data. We like to see a little bit of trend data before we start doing data targets. So we'll ask you to put in, if you have it, 3 years worth of data for that goal, past data, so we can kind of see, how things are going. And then we'll ask you to put in a target data. So your target data is normally 1 year into the future. We don't do a lot of, 5 years from now, because that doesn't get people going right now. We always want to know in your target data, where are you going to be 1 year from now? And for our target data, that's something that you commit to be at that point a year from now, and it's something that most of our schools hold themselves accountable for. We're not holding you accountable, you're holding yourself accountable for reaching those targets. That means you're going to work your tails off to get there. And then a year from now, we'll collect follow-up data to see if you got there. And when you set a good target that's, pushes you a little bit, and with really hard work you can get the kids to that point, and then the kids get to that point, that is so inspiring. It just kind of creates a lot of energy. So we collect that follow-up data, and we see how we're doing. If you don't meet your targets, it's not a horrible thing. It just means that your interventions didn't work the way you wanted them to, or maybe your target was too big or whatever. So if you don't meet the targets, we just go back and we recreate, we tweak. So okay, so that's how we do the data. And then we talked about the time frame that we'll do follow-up data within 1 year. So okay, so that's the parts that we'll have you put in the system for our SMART goals. And then here's some examples. So in this first example is for an elementary school. So here's the broad area, the PAI. I'm working on proficiency or pass rate, math for the bottom 25%. So I kind of know what we're doing here. We're working on math, bottom 25%, I-STEP pass rate. So now we're going to look at SMART goals. So you can see, and this is from an actual school, you can see they focused in on their 6th graders. Their 6th grade must have been where they were really having an issue. So they decided for their SMART goals to increase the percentage of 6th graders in the bottom 25% who pass I-STEP math. Still a little general. We still don't really know what to work on within I-STEP math. Just we know the student group is going to be 6th graders in the bottom 25%. Here's another one they put in. Increase the percentage of all 6th graders who master algebra and functions. So now we're at the standards level, so very cool. This, and we're not going to work on that just with the bottom 25%. We're going to work with that with all kids. we're hoping that the bottom 25%, since we're also focusing on them, our interventions are really going to grab those low achieving students. But this is an area where we want all kids to improve on algebra and functions. So now on the next one, you can see we've switched to a school-created assessment to earn 90% on this weekly math test. We're real big on frequent classroom assessments to see if your interventions are working and to identify students who aren't learning so that we can do some extra stuff or different stuff with them to make sure that they've learned. Tina, who works with your school, was a pioneer, big-time pioneer in Indiana, using frequent classroom assessments, and she, I'm sure, will be able to answer lots of questions that you have about how to do that. She's kind of a whiz on that. But you can see, here's one: increase the percentage of sixth graders in the bottom 25% who have earned a 90% on this math test. And then as this school further looked at the data, they discovered that they had an achievement gap with their free and reduced lunch kids. So they also are going to go a little bit further and say increase the percentage of sixth grade free and reduced in the bottom 25% who earn a 90% on the weekly math test. Now, let me tell you why this is important. If you didn't have that, and this is a true story, we had a school that did not have this last one, did have this one, increase the percentage actually they didn't even have that. It was just the percentage of sixth graders who mastered standards and passed I-STEP. So what they did was, when they got to the intervention level, since they weren't focused on a student group, they were just kind of focused generally, they said, okay, let's have after-school tutoring. And they did this wonderful program, and they really did some nice after-school tutoring. And what they found was that their paid lunch students improved, and their free and reduced lunch students did not. And finally, the light bulb went off. Oh my gosh, we've created an intervention that's going to widen the achievement gap because we created an intervention that the free and reduced lunch kids could not participate in. They had to go home after school and babysit because their parents were working two low-income jobs. So, so when you focus in the goals on your student achievement gaps, that later will cause you to focus on your interventions, to design interventions that are going to go after or be invitational or engaging to the student group that you're targeting. So, okay, let's go on. Here's the second PAI for the same school, student growth in math, and bottom 25%. And this time, since we're working on growth, they created a goal, the percentage of sixth graders in the bottom 25% who are in the 9 on the weekly math test. But they've also decided to create a student group for a certain class, so that maybe the class of 2022 or whoever. And this way, by having a student group that's a class, they can follow the same group of students from 6th grade to 7th grade to 8th grade, 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade. They can follow that same group of students over time to see if the percentage who are passing this assessment is increasing year to year with the same group of kids. So you may ask, why would I want to have one goal that's written, increase the percentage of 6th graders, and then another one, percentage of class of 2022. If I'm the 6th grade math teacher, I want to know year to year, how is the 6th grade compared to 6th grade compared to 6th grade compared to 6th grade. I'm focused on my interventions and the impact that they're having on 6th graders. However, I also might be interested in looking at, okay, here's my 6th graders, but I didn't reach them all at the end of 6th grade. What are we doing to get them all reached by the end of 7th grade, by the end of 8th grade, by the end of 9th grade? So tracking that data vertically from grade level to grade level can be just as important as tracking the data horizontally, comparing over the years 6th grade to 6th grade to 6th grade to 6th grade. So for each of your data targets, you'll need to decide, do you want to track that data vertically, or do you want to track the data horizontally, grade level to grade level to grade level, same grade level. Okay, so something to think about there as you create that. Okay, so here's some high school examples. We're looking at, this is a PAI for high school. The first one is proficiency for Algebra 1, so pass rate in the Algebra 1 end of course assessment. And again, increase the percentage of, this is going to be vertical data, the class of 2019 who mastered quadratic equations. So, the first year I'm looking at them, if maybe they're coming in as 8th graders, and I'm looking at that data, and then I'm 9th graders, 10th graders, so I'm tracking that data vertically. And then increase the percentage of 2019 who earn 90% of the weekly math test. Here's that idea again of having a frequent classroom assessment, and then looking at a student group free and reduced lunch. So here's college and career ready, second PAI, so complete 1 of 4 college ready tasks. And then how am I going to drill that down? So I'm looking at I'm maybe focusing on AP Calc, so I'm looking at the percentage of graduates who pass an AP Calc test. Let me say something about that real quickly. We've done a lot of work with AP, IB, and dual credit, and just kind of a heads up for the high schools, we'll really encourage you to express that data as the percentage of graduates who have passed this rather than the percentage of test takers. A lot of schools will look at this data as the percentage of students who take an AP test, what percentage pass. But from our perspective, a student who does never enroll in an AP class and never takes the test also doesn't pass the test. So to really not sugarcoat the data, we like to look at it, at the end of high school, how many out of the whole, senior class, what percentage have passed an AP test or an AP Calc test. So not just the percentage of the kids who took the test. So, okay, you ask us more questions about that if that needs further explanation. And then also something else that we find is we find huge gaps in AP, IB, and dual credit on the percentage of students who are paid lunch and free and reduced lunch who pass an AP test or an IB exam. And this is actually another area where our organization has done a lot of work, so if you want some hints on that, on how to reach the free and reduced low-income kids on AP, IB, and dual credit, we can help you with that as well. So yeah, so again, more general graduates, and then more specific, not only are they graduates, but free and reduced lunch. Okay. Okay, one other thing before we go on. We are very, very much committed to helping you do a good job in this section. And I just wanted to give you a heads up that we will be looking at your data as well. And if we see something that we think that you've missed, like maybe you've got a huge achievement gap between boys and girls, and you've not put anything in your school improvement plan into your goals to address that boys are lower achieving in your school than girls. Don't be surprised if we call and make a suggestion that you might be wanting to focus on your males. Sometimes we have schools that put in way too many goals, and we are fearful that they'll spread themselves thin. And if that's the case, Tina will call and say, "Are you sure you want to do all this?" Sometimes we have schools that don't set enough goals, SMART goals, to really drive their PAIs or to raise student achievement. And so we'll be calling to push and encourage you to do a little bit more. We will nudge and push and encourage. We'll look at we pretend that we're you, and we look at all your data and just kind of, come up with, where we would go if we were in your school. We'll chat with you about that, but the decision maker is always you. So, you always have the right to say, "Oh yeah, we can handle 3,000 SMART goals," and, if that's what you decide, then that's what you decide, but we'll question you along the way. So, it's just like we like to think of ourselves just like basketball coaches. If a basketball coach were watching their kids do layups and there was one player that had a horrible form, that basketball coach would probably work with that player and help them, correct and improve in that area. And same thing, we're watching very closely in this area, so don't be offended if we jump in and say, "Have you thought about this, or did you see that?" And because that's what we do. That's why we work with schools. This is also a very good place for you to call Tina, to initiate and call Tina and say, this is what we're thinking. Are you seeing anything that we don't see? Or, what do you think about this? Or, we've got these 12 goals, but we think that's going to stretch us. So we're thinking about only doing 3 of them. What do you think about that? So call Tina, use her as a sounding board as you're going through this thinking process. Okay, so now finished with introduction. Now let's look at the discussions that you're going to have. So there's 3 parts to this, and you can decide to do these 3 parts all at once, or you can decide to do them separately. And I'll give you some thoughts on how to do that. So before you get to the discussion, there's a couple of things that you should check. One, is your vision statement the way you want it to be? Is it done? Is it finished? Do you have the data in the final section? So you've looked at your vision statement. The other thing is to check your achievement data report. You can't review the data if you don't have the data in the achievement data report, so that's got to be finished before you can go into the discussion. This is also a really good time to thank your achievement data point person. That person has been working their tail off to get all the achievement data in there. It's no easy task. It's time consuming. So on behalf of our organization, thank you to the achievement data point person. We know, having done this for years, how time consuming that is, and it's kind of a pain, but I think you'll see in this step that your effort is, was worthwhile, in that the data is really going to be helpful to school improvement planning. So thank that person profusely, because that really, that took some time. So you do want to make sure, though, that your achievement data report is ready to go, all the data's in, and then I would eyeball it too and just see, does anything jump out at you as being like way off base? Is there anything in there that would indicate a typo or something that just doesn't look right? So kind of take a look at that. Okay, so the discussion is a 4-step process. And again, these steps can be done at different times, or they can all be done at once. Is this time consuming? And there's just no way around that. If you're going to do good school improvement planning, you got to roll up your sleeves and dig into the data. It's just how it works. If you take shortcuts here, I can guarantee you that your school improvement plan will not be as strong, and I can guarantee you that you'll be less likely to raise student achievement. If you dig in here, when you dig in here, you increase your chances of raising student achievement considerably. So to me, yes, it's time, but I think it's worthwhile. So here's the steps. The first one is an individual reflection. So let's talk about that first. So what you're going to do as individuals, you're going to review the vision statement, especially the data in the last part of the vision statement. You're going to then look at the student achievement data report, and you're going to answer these questions for yourself. I am pleased that, and then I am pleased that 94% of our students passed the I-STEP math test, whatever the data is. I am concerned that 23% of our free reduced lunch kids passed I-STEP math. So the same data fields can please you and disturb you. I'm pleased that everybody seems to pass, but I'm concerned that only 23% of my African American students, or my free reduced lunch kids, or whoever, passed. So and then, do you have achievement gaps? Yes. So, and then you would show that data. So these are the questions that we're asking. It's just kind of, when you look at that, what pleases you and what concerns you. In terms of the gaps, one of the questions that we get is, how big of a gap does it have to be before it's significant? And that is really dependent on you. For some people, a 2-point gap is horrible. To think that boys are out-achieving girls by 2 points, and they want that to be equal. For some folks, it's got to be a 10-point gap before it starts to be upsetting. For others, it's a 30-point gap. I think on average, about a 10-point gap is what our schools tend to engage at. When they see that big of a gap, they think something must be going on. But again, it's what can you tolerate, and it depends on your belief system, your internal belief system. So okay, this individual reflection part can happen separately. You might say today, okay, everybody, let's go home in your living rooms, pull up the data report that we're giving you, print it out, and put a plus mark next to the things that please you, put a minus sign with a circle around it next to the things that concern you, and put a big check on any achievement gaps that you see. So just go home in your living room, do that, and let's reconvene in a day or 2 days. So that could be done separately. Okay, or it doesn't have to be. You could all say right now, right after this webinar, okay, let's pull out our data reports, let's all jump into that. Okay, so when you're reading the data tables, I want to show you kind of how to review them. This is how the data will appear when you get it from us, and there's a couple things that I want to point out. First one is we'll always give you the data source. So we're looking now at state testing. It's from the Indiana DOE website, and this was auto-populated into your system by us, so you didn't have to type this one in. And then we give you the student group. So you'll see all students, test takers, all students. We give you the benchmark, what we wanted that group to do, pass ISTEP math, pass algebra, and of course assessment, pass ISTEP English Language Arts. And then we've given you data. We will give you 3 years of historical data, and notice that we have the percentage here, but we also have the raw numbers. Sometimes this can be really alarming. Sometimes it'll be like maybe only 2% are passing, but then it's data for Native Americans, and 2%, when you only have 3 or 1 Native American in your school, maybe 2% isn't, I don't think that data would even work out, but a small percentage isn't quite as alarming when the number of students is small, where 2% of 1,000 kids, I mean, that would be, that would be a lot more concerning. So, okay, so that's what we give you. And then what we're asking you again is just to identify what pleases you. So maybe what pleases you is that, oh my gosh, 89% of our students are passing ISTEP math. That's really cool. I am disturbed that, I look through all these percentages, what's this? 72? Ooh, I'm a little disturbed that only 72% of our kids are passing Biology 1. And then an achievement gap exists. In this chart, we don't have any achievement data. I'll show you one in a second where we do. So yeah, so that's how to read our data tables. And then I wanted to talk with you about all the data that you're looking at. There's a ton of data, but there's a lot less than we used to have. About 3 years ago, we went through with some advice from schools and really talked about what data the schools need to look at to really help them develop a good school improvement plan. And the data that you're looking at were things that we just felt like we had to have you look at. So we took out anything that was borderline important or wasn't important, and every data table that you're looking at in our reports we think is really important for you to understand student achievement and where you need to improve in your school. So I want to say a couple of things about these. This first data chart is what we call the big picture data, and it is the percentage of all of the students in your school who are passing ISTEP or ECA math or language arts. And this is big picture data. For school improvement planning, it's absolutely worthless. If you were to tell me that 70% of your students passed ISTEP math and that's all I knew, I would have no idea where to go in terms of school improvement planning. It's not specific enough that I know what to do to improve. So if that's the case, why does the Department of Ed in Indiana ask you and report and have there be high stakes on the percentage of all students that are passing ISTEP and ECA? The reason is because organizations like the Department of Ed, your school board, they need to have a snapshot of the academic health of your school. And that's all this is. It's just a snapshot of it's one quick, easy to look at number that gives you a snapshot or a general sense of what the academic health of your school is. So it doesn't help at all in terms of school improvement planning, but it's really important because some folks need to have a snapshot of the academic health of your school. So we give you this data because we know that your school board and the Department of Ed and you too, everybody needs to have kind of that general sense of the academic health. But in terms of school improvement planning, this is not helpful. So what we do is we go down to the drill down reports. Now I'm starting to get helpful because now I'm starting to see, okay, which students are not achieving. So we look again at the state testing, but now we're going to disaggregate or drill down the data by grade level. So now I can say, oh, it's the third graders that aren't achieving. Oh, it's the free and reduced lunch kids, or it's the kids who have limited English, or it's the special ed kids. So we're drilling down the data so that we can know how to design our school improvement planning so that it's focused where it needs to be focused. And then we like to also very much, and this is an area that we'll push in on a little bit, we like you to go down to the standards level. If you have no standards in your SMART goals identified as a benchmark, we'll probably encourage you to do that. So in terms of the ISTEP standards, the ECA standards, now I'm drilling down farther. Now I can start to maybe fine-tune my interventions a little bit because I know it's third graders or seventh graders who are not mastering ratios. Now I can kind of fine-tune my interventions a little bit. So I'm going to those drill down reports. We like those drill down reports a lot. And then the other type of data that we have found to be very helpful, and this is maybe something you've not focused on before or heard others talk about. We talk a lot about report card integrity. When you put grades on a report card, you're putting data on a report card for parents to look at. And that data on the report card, the grades on the report cards, need to accurately convey what you want them to convey. So one of the things we've asked you to do, and your achievement data point person has done this with your help, is to identify a mastery grade. The mastery grade is what we asked is what grade on a report card would indicate that a student is probably going to pass ISTEP or an ECA assessment. So, and for some schools it's a B, for some it's a C, for some it's an A. So I would say for most of our schools it's a B. And that's a problem because when parents look at that report card and they see a C, to them that means average. That means okay, my kid's average. That's okay. When a C is on a report card, most parents that we have surveyed expect that their child's going to pass ISTEP. But the teachers are saying, no, that's not the case. It's a B on a report card that would generally indicate that the student is proficient enough to pass ISTEP. So later down the road, we're going to do a comparison of the percentage of students who earn the mastery grade versus the percentage of students who actually passed ISTEP. And if it ends up being that your mastery grade is really a B, then we'll encourage you to convey that to parents, that a C is not a good grade in our school. A C would indicate that there's risk of not passing ISTEP or ECA. A B is what you want your kids to be earning. And then also we'll look at promotion rate. And again, we're looking at, what are the messages? Your student has been promoted from third grade to fourth grade, but, we're looking at how does that compare to the percent that are mastering and passing ISTEP in English language arts. Again, we'll have you look at the data, but we're not going to tell you what to do about it. That's something that you'll have to decide. We're just going to help tease out the data stories, and then you'll decide what to do about it. Okay, so then going on with additional data that you'll be looking at in this data report, in the middle schools, we'll ask you to look at the percentage of students who earn high school credit in middle school. And then in high school, there's a bunch of other stuff. There's a couple things I wanted to say about this. This is a table, the Core 40 progress. In working with schools for almost 20 years, ever since Core 40 came out. What we have discovered in looking at a lot of data is that there's a lot of students who go into high school intending to earn a Core 40 diploma, and they drop out of that track after 10th grade. And typically it's because they haven't passed chemistry or they haven't earned enough Core 40 credits to keep going. So we just want you to monitor the percentage of students who are making progress towards Core 40, and that will help you, again, to tell the data stories. Where does that drop off? And then when you're looking at the root causes, you can start to look at, okay, where does the drop off? Oh, after 10th grade. What happens in 10th grade? Oh, kids take chemistry, and we have a very low pass rate in chemistry. So then maybe your interventions are going to focus on help for kids in chemistry. So yeah, so that Core 40 progress. AP potential, that's another one we have you look at. The PSAT test will help you understand what kids, the percentage of kids that have the potential for doing well in an AP class. And that's kind of interesting when we get later in the process. It's kind of interesting to see that, you know, I've got 30% of my students who would do well in an AP class, but I don't offer any AP classes. So yeah, so that, you know, we can look at interventions then. Math course success, same thing. We'll kind of work through what percentage of the kids are passing Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, you know, pre-calc, calc. So we'll help you kind of monitor the pass rates in your math classes. And then we already talked about APIB and dual credit. And then the final section in the report is anything else that you wanted to put in the assessment data that you look at. So DIBELS, NAEP, reading assessments, Terra Nova, school-created assessment that you guys have come up with and designed yourselves. So those are all the data charts. You can see we're very data rich. It takes some time to look at all that data. Okay, then on this slide, again, just kind of teaching you how to use our data report. This is a data report for mastery grades in 6th grade for the subject area English. Okay, and the school has typed into the system that their mastery grade is a C or higher. So when I look at this data, I can see that in this data chart we have disaggregated. So in terms of mastery grades, I've got all students, then I've got disaggregation by gender, and then by race and ethnicity, then free and reduced paid lunch, then limited English, and then special ed. So what I'd like you to do is just look at the data in this last column, 13, 14, and I'm going to count to 30 silently. And if you'll find achievement gaps in that data, if any, that would be areas that you would say were disturbing to you. Okay, I'm counting to 30 quietly. Okay, so I'm wondering if you saw these things. Male, female, this is a real school's data. Mastery grades, 6th grade. 90% of the females earned the mastery grade or better. Only 68% of the males did. This is real data. So this school had to sit down and kind of figure out why is that happening and what interventions can we put in place to close this achievement gap while also helping all students to improve. That was one area that jumped out to me. And I'm wondering if this one disturbed anybody. Free and reduced lunch versus paid lunch. Paid lunch students, 92% of the students were mastering, and free and reduced, 76. So, you know, there's a couple things that you could say here. One is, you know, we've definitely got a gap. I think, in my opinion, this would make me uncomfortable to have that kind of a gap. So is there something that that our paid lunch students have that, you know, some intervention or something that's drawing them in and getting them to earn the master grade, while our free and reduced lunch kids are not? One other thing, though, you might want to look at in this school is that my paid lunch students, this is a really low-income school, I only have 13 paid lunch students. So really this is kind of a whole student body issue when this, so many, such a high percentage of the students are free and reduced. So, okay, things to look at. Okay, one other thing is that when we talk about disaggregated data, we will say things like boys and girls may be experiencing an achievement gap. We always kind of put a question mark in there because we don't know if the gaps are truly due to a difference in achievement between boys and girls or if there's a bias in the test. So, and then the other thing are that when using disaggregated data, we like you as much as possible to use objective data, test scores, to back up your statement that boys are, achieving at a higher level than girls, rather than subjective data. Because like report card grades, there may be bias in that, that you wouldn't see in a standardized test. So, yeah, so something to think about as you're identifying gaps. Okay, so and just remembering in the future, I've kind of been alluding to this, if we have those gaps identified in the achievement data targets in your goals, in your SMART goals, then when we get to root causes and interventions, we can start to explain why that student group is experiencing a gap, and then you can design interventions around that. It really focuses your school improvement plan, which is why I think we get such bigger gains and achievement than schools that don't work with us, is because we're so focused. Okay, we talked about these things. Okay, so that's the initial step, and then the next discussion is to, after we've looked at this data individually, is to look at the data as a group, and to just talk about it. What disturbed you? What pleased you? And the person sitting next to you might have noticed some data that you missed, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, I didn't even see that. That's horrible, or that's wonderful. I missed that. So you're kind of having this just general discussion about what you all came up with. And then the next step is to say, okay, let's make this more formal now. What should be our PAIs? And maybe you've got a flip chart out or a blackboard, and you're saying, okay, PAI 1, what's the focus, what's the subject area, what's the grade level, what's the subgroup, and you're defining that. PAI 2, what's the focus, subject, grade level, subgroup. So you're kind of defining these broad areas together. So that's this step, is to come up with PAIs. So now we're getting more formal. I'm going to go back. Step 2 was kind of just a discussion about what you found in the data. And now step 3, we're formalizing it, saying, okay, here's our PAIs. Most schools will have 1, 2, 3. I would not have more than 3 PAIs. These are broad areas. You can have a gazillion, not a gazillion. You can have many SMART goals underneath each of those PAIs, but we would suggest not a lot of PAIs. Okay, and then the last part of the discussion is, what should our SMART goals be for each of the PAIs? So now you've got PAI 1 was this. Okay, let's get some very specific SMART goals then. What standards do we need to work on? Which student groups need to work on that? So you're writing those SMART goals. So remember, you've got how PAIs and SMART goals relate. You've got the broad PAIs, and then you've got the SMART goals, are the specific targets that are very narrow. They're focused on a standard, on a student group, and they're aligned with the PAIs. So, okay. Now, one thing I wanted to point out, and then we'll very quickly show you how to document all this in the online system. Remember, a couple of webinars ago, we had you fill out the SIP uses page, and you said that you're a focus school or a priority school, or you're Title I TAS or Title I school-wide, or you want your school improvement plan to align with all Indiana rules and regs. Every time you answer one of those questions, we customize the website. And this is an area where it's very customized. So not every school will have the same rubrics here. And let's just kind of read through. These are the rubrics for goals. Each PAI is supported by one or more appropriate SMART goals. A grade level or class has been identified for each SMART goal. Student group demographics have been identified for the SMART goal. A narrow targeted benchmark is there. Historical target and vision data have been entered. And then we get into some of the specific ones. So at least one SMART goal exists for a student group that has not met AMO. And if you said that you wanted to use your school improvement plan to meet Indiana rules and regs, you will have this rubric item. At least one SMART goal addresses the Title I targeted students. You're only going to get this rubric item if you are a Title I task school. So some of these rubric items are there because you've told us that you're using our system to meet outside expectations. So everybody will have different rubric items here. Okay. Okay, let's look online. Just kind of go through that quickly. Okay. So, let's see here. So I'm into achievement goals. I'm logged in as demo school. And I'm just going to fly through this. So participate in this webinar, review your vision statement, review the achievement data report. It's there. Conduct the steering team discussion. That's what we've been talking about in this webinar. Then this next part is really important. We're going to open the discussion. That's not something you've had to do before, but in this step you have to do it. So you click this button. For demo school, it's not. I want to actually demonstrate it, and I've already done it for demo school, so I'm going to switch over here. So I'm going to, oops, scroll down. There we go. So I'm going to open this discussion. I click on this, and I go to a page that looks like this. So this page is telling you that there are different discussion formats. You can discuss online, or you can discuss face-to-face, or you can do both. However, because we're cutting out the council, all of our discussions are going to be face-to-face. So we're going to scroll down, and to open the discussion, you're going to say, will you have an in-person meeting as well as the online discussion? We're going to forget the online discussion. You will be having an in-person meeting. You're going to say yes. You'll put in the date, either today or whenever you're going to have this discussion. Then the discussion will open when you click the send invitation button, when you want the discussion to end. So, you know, I'd leave that open for quite a while, probably till June 20th when the deadline is, and then send the invitation. You've got to do that to make the rest of our system work. Next year when we have a council, we'll be able to have these discussions online, but this year we're doing them all face-to-face. So, okay, that's how you do that, and don't forget to click the send invitation at the bottom. Okay, so we open the discussion, then you'll have the discussion, then we're going to enter the discussion summary. These are just text boxes, and you'll be telling me and Tina and the rest of our staff who wrote the summary, what the date was, and then what pleases you about, what pleases your steering team members about the student achievement data, what concerns them, what possible gaps exist, and then anything else you want us to know about that discussion. Okay, so you put in the discussion summary. Now we're going to enter the PAIs. Very simple. So you've got 1, 2, or 3 PAIs. I've already got one in here. When I go to add a new one, I would just say I'm going to, let me make this a little smaller here. Okay. Oops, come back. Okay. I'm going to have my student focus on pass rate. I want it to be in English language arts. I want it to be for my 4th graders and the lower achieving ones. And then rationale, why do I pick this? So I'm explaining, I'm putting in some rationale here, why I picked this PAI. And then if this is going to align with English language arts. So this is my external expectations will appear here, and this will be different for every school depending on which external expectations you checked off in the uses box. So I'm going to click that and then save. So that's how easy it is. Now I have two PAIs. I have one for algebra, I have one for related to English language arts. Okay, so that's how you see how long that took. I mean, it didn't take very long at all. Okay, so now I'm going to go back. That's how you get your PAIs in. And so now I'm going to enter the SMART goals. So I go to enter my SMART goals, and notice here that I've got two PAIs. So I've got two tabs up here, and I'll put in a SMART goal that's going to align with this PAI. So I'm going to add a SMART goal, and again I'm just filling the blanks. This is going to be a SMART goal for a grade level, and now it's going to ask me which grade level, so I'm going to say 7th. It's going to ask me, do I want this to be for all students or do I want it to be for a subgroup? And I've noticed that my free and reduced lunch kids need to be targeted for this SMART goal, so I'm going to click there. I'm going to scroll down. My benchmark is to master ratios, and my historical data is that 23% of the students mastered in May of 2013, and I fill in the rest of that data. And then target data, whatever you want to get that up to by May of 2017, 1 year out. Vision data, my dream data is that 100% of the kids would do that. And then does this relate to one of these external expectations? And it does not, so I'm going to just go ahead and save this. But again, this is kind of giving you a heads up. At least one of your SMART goals has to be aligned with each of these 4 things. So I'm going to save, and now I've got 2 SMART goals that are aligned with this PAI. When I'm finished with that PAI, I'm going to go to the next PAI and add a SMART goal. So that's how you get those in. Going back. Those are the SMART goals. Now, this is a report that just shows you the PAIs and the SMART goals together. And then on the expectations crosswalk, this gives you all of the external expectations, and then it shows you the SMART goals that you have in that meet them. And if there's an external expectation that doesn't have any SMART goals with it, there will be a red flag there to let you know that you need a SMART goal for that. Okay, I can edit the SMART goals if I find an external expectation is not met, and then I submit them. And then don't forget to check your rubric items, of course, before you submit. Okay, I think that's it. And I know I'm about 5 minutes over. I apologize. Let me just go back and make sure there's nothing else I want to do here. Yeah, so 2 tasks, throughout this process. You're entering your PAIs and you're entering the SMART goals, and call Tina. We really, really want to help you in this section. Okay, that's all I've got. Tina, what questions do we have?
Okay, it says with the 2015-16 ISTEP data coming out soon, can we extend the time to complete this so we can also look at that data? I know it wouldn't be in the report generated, but it would be very beneficial to our improvement process.
Absolutely. I appreciate that question. So here's how we'll handle this. We really can't extend the deadline, and let me show you why. But I'll tell you how we'll handle that, because the concern that you brought up is very legitimate. Let's see, I want to go to this one. In the process page, you'll notice that here's our goals segment, so this is where we're working, and you'll notice that everything after that is not functional. We really can't go on in this process until your goals are finished. And so to make sure that you can meet DOE's fall deadline for submitting your 16-17 plan, we can't stall anymore. We have to move forward. So how we handle that is most of the time schools don't see huge differences in 1 year's worth of data on ISTEP or ECA. So what we ask you to do is to use the most recent data that you have available. So for some schools it'll be 2014 because they're just using our system, but we know that schools you have 2015 data. We don't have it yet because DOE has not released it publicly, but you have 2015 data. So if you wanted to, also look at that data in addition to the data report that we have, that would be a really good idea. So, but then what we do is if we're in this process and there's data that comes out like a month too late or 6 weeks after we're at that step, what we do is when that data does come out, we do a quick check. 99% of the time that does not change the achievement goals because there's not a lot of change in the data that we look at in 1 year's time worth of period. So if ratios was an issue last year, probably ratios is going to be an issue, hopefully not as big of an issue, but slight, it'll be an issue going forward as well. So that's the best we can do. I know it's messy, but we have to stick on the timeline or we won't be able to get all the work done before the deadline. So yeah, we've had that discussion a lot with our schools, and schools have tried to come up with a different timeline that might work, but this actually has worked fairly well. I mean, actually very well. It's just, when we get the new data, we'll do a quick check and just make sure everything's in alignment. And if it's not, then we'll do some tweaking. But it's just the nature of it. So, but if you have that 2015 and well, you do have that 2015 data in-house, feel free to look at that data.
Okay, another question, can we have a PAI related to ISTEP science?
Yes. So this is, let me go back to that slide. That was a good question too. When you're entering your PAIs for us, what happened to the PAI slide? When you're entering the PAI for us, let me say it the other way. When you're entering the PAI for DOE, and this will happen on the student achievement plan that the focus and priority schools are asked to do. When you enter that PAI, the only choices they give you are English, Math, English 10, and Algebra 1. However, for our purposes, we don't want to tie your hands like that because we know that schools, like you're saying, will have an interest in science or social studies or world languages or whatever. So you'll have the option in our system to put in other subjects, but we'll need to make sure that at least one of your PAIs hits one of DOE's subjects as well.
Okay, and one other one, and in my schedule, says, are we still meeting on August 1st, or has that been rescheduled? And I have that has been rescheduled for August 4th. Is that correct?
Yes, as far as I know, and we'll talk with your central office again and confirm that date, but I understand that August 1st was like your first day of school or the day before the first day of school or something. It just was not going to work for you guys, and we appreciate how you work to accommodate our schedule, and we want to, as much as we can, work to accommodate yours too. So we'll get that out to everybody either through your central office or from us, but it will not be August 1st, and as far as I know, it's August 4th. Anything else, Tina?
I don't think so. Just keep sending those submissions and don't be shy. Give me a call. I'm here.
Yeah, this is a good time to contact Tina. She's really good at this stuff. So, Okay, that sounds good. And again, I apologize for being over. We really try to keep these to an hour. So, but thank you for sticking in, and we will talk to remember, July is off. We wanted everybody to have a little bit of a break, and we'll come back in August then. Okay, thanks everybody, and we'll look forward to getting those goals sent in. Thanks.